Welcome to the Paperboyz, the September 23rd, 2015 edition featuring the Waterloo-Cedar Falls Courier Sports Department. I am Assistant Sports Editor Jim Sullivan, filling in for Doug Newhoff, who is off today. To my right is Sports Writer Nick Petaros. To my left, Jim Nelson from our Sports Department. And we have a number of topics today we'd like to touch on. And I see no better place to begin than the National Football League. And there are a number of stories there that are of interest nationally and especially locally. As many of you know, David Johnson, former Northern Iowa running back, has made a tremendous impact with the Arizona Cardinals. Ran a kickoff back 108 yards for a touchdown and has now scored, I think, a rushing, receiving, and touchdown via kickoff in his first two games. And his uniform is down the Hall of Fame for that accomplishment. Green Bay, the Packers are 2-0, knocked off the Seahawks the other night in Green Bay. The Bears lost their quarterback, Jay Cutler, and are struggling. And the Vikings, 1-1 after a hard-earned victory over the Lions. And I guess I'd like to start with this. Of the things we've mentioned here, Johnson, the Packers 2-0, Bears 0-2, Vikings 1-1, what surprises you the most, if anything?
I think the interesting thing is Johnson. That's a great story. You know, your rookie year, you don't know what you're going to get out of him. He's got Ellington and Chris Johnson in that backfield, so you kind of didn't know his role on that team. But for him to come out those first two games and get some the touchdowns the way he has on his touches and the explosive ability that he's shown has been really impressive. I think it's a guy that looks like he's going to have a bright future in the NFL, and it's really neat to see what he's been able to do here at the beginning of his career.
Yeah, you know, and he seems, I've read a couple interviews, he seems to be staying humble right now, and he understands this isn't going to be the way it is. I think he's averaging like 28 yards a touch or something like that. And this is the way it is. They're going to just hit it. They're going to hit teams with him here and there. Bruce Arians, their head coach, he doesn't really likes to rely on rookie running backs to carry the load a lot, and they're gonna have special packages for him, and he's gonna play here and there, and they're gonna expand his role as they go, and so teams are gonna have to prepare for him. But you know, he's not gonna be their featured back, and then more they're gonna hit him with him, and I think that's really what they've got. I mean, the kickoff return was beautifully blocked. I mean, he made a couple nice cuts, but he just ran through a huge hole and kept on trucking.
I think in that case with the kickoff return, we saw everything that makes David Johnson, it has been a great running back. We saw the ability to read the field, patience, setting up his blocks, and we saw the closing speed. I mean, you would tend not to think of a guy that's built like that as being fast. Maybe he's not an Olympic sprinter, but he is fast enough to outrun special teams or defense, and he certainly showed that. I think it's also interesting that people who saw him play here had a pretty good sense that he was going to succeed at the National Football League level, but I'm not sure we thought it would be this far, this fast. He's adapted remarkably well. I think he did all the right things to get himself in position to do well. There are a number of possibilities that could slow him down, injuries, that sort of thing, the offensive line trouble and all that. But right now, David Johnson looks to be on the fast track to success, which is more than we can say for the Chicago Bears, who are, like I said, struggling now, have to deal for a while at least without Mr. Cutler. And Nick, you're a Bears fan. What sort of gloom and doom are you sensing, or do you have any of that at all?
Well, I think you'd hope their defense would eventually be improved, and you haven't seen any signs of that to this point. They've had some bad luck with Kevin White, their first round pick, going down with an injury, and now Cutler, as bad as he's been or as inconsistent as he's been. I think we saw last Sunday how he's still a pretty big gap between him and Jimmy Clausen in talent level, and it's almost astounding the Bears haven't addressed that need to bring in a backup quarterback, and you wonder if they'll bring in somebody here yet this season, depending on Cutler's status. But Forte is obviously the center point of that offense now, and should have been throughout the year, but you just don't. Not a lot of reasons for optimism other than you think the Vikings and the Lions should still be beatable within the division. It's a division that you'd have to imagine Green Bay runs away with at this point.
John Fox is a first-year coach there, well, obviously as experienced as he get in the NFL with stops at Denver, Carolina, where he's done very well. Does he get a pass for this year?
Yeah, I think so. I got a new GM coming in as well, so I think a lot of that can fall on the previous regime and what they've done. But yeah, I think you have to give Fox a pass here, and right now, if you're a Bears fan, you have to be kind of wishing you had that Lovie Smith era where you you had a great dominant defense and maybe not the flashy offense, but one that could take care of the football and a team that could find ways to win games. They don't have anything that you can get really excited about at this point right now. It looks like they might be on the clock for a draft pick here pretty soon.
A couple interesting things about the Packers and the Vikings. Number one, I think, in case anyone had forgotten, Aaron Rodgers reminded us why he's one of the best quarterbacks in the business, if not the best right now. Some remarkable throws. And what struck me watching the game on Sunday night was his ability, again, to escape a rush. His ability to get away from a defender, look down the field, and find a target. He made some great throws in that game. And I think, Nick, you're right. The Packers are the team to beat in the division. And barring further injuries, and they've suffered a few already, I think they're a strong contender. Certainly they're going to win the Central, or the North, I guess it is now, and certainly could have a chance at the Super Bowl. As for the Vikings, Adrian Peterson is back, and they finally gave him the ball, which was good to see. Teddy Bridgewater was also impressive in that game, but for much the same reasons that I liked Rodgers, his ability to dodge a rush, look downfield, and then actually hurt a team with his running ability. Long way to go for this team yet, with a big game coming up against San Diego at home. So we'll see what happens. There's also, of course, high school football, and there's a lot of things going on locally here. And last week, I think, was kind of an intriguing week for a couple of reasons. One, Waterloo West went to Mason City and dismantled the Mohawks in a record-setting fashion. And two, Cedar Falls locked up with Urbandale in an epic high school football game and lost. I believe it was in triple overtime. What are your thoughts? I mean, let's start with West. That's a good win for them, and as I said, they did it in spectacular fashion.
Yeah, this is a team that, when they put it together in a game, I think they're very dangerous. They're just like they have been. I think each of the last year, maybe not so much last year, but the last 4 years, West has been a dangerous team with enough offensive weapons. They played just good enough defense to, if they don't make mistakes, they're going to be in a game. Fort Dodge, they had probably close to. They moved the ball up and down the field in the first half and were trailing by 4 scores. And they lose at 47-7. And it was a game in the first half where I would have said it's even, except Fort Dodge scored when they had their chances and West didn't. So this seems, and this is they're coming in a rivalry game. This is it's become more of a rivalry game. I think West 2 years ago, last time they played in the Dome, with the games in the Dome this week, West snapped a 17-year losing streak, if I'm right, and beat Cedar Falls. And then last year, Cedar Falls put it to them in Memorial Stadium. But this game has got, I think it's going to be potentially be one of the better Metro games in a while. And you like I said, West is, you like Devon Moore, you like Trey Burton. They got it, and Harrison Amy. He's not very tall, but boy, he runs hard and he hits the hole quite fast, and he gives them balance running and passing.
Nick, Trey Burton was your prep of the week this week, and you can read that in the Wednesday Courier. Just give us your impressions of how he felt about the night he had.
He's actually a pretty soft-spoken, kind of humble guy. Doesn't fit the stereotype of big play wide receivers who usually like to be heard. But I think it was one of those deals where he was able to exploit a matchup. Mason City did an effective job of actually stopping Harrison Amy in that West run game, and they're guarding him with man coverage on the outside. And he's one of those wide receivers that likes to be able to exploit that. He's able to get deep on them, and Devin threw him some nice deep balls, and he was able to take advantage of that. But it really was an incredible night. You look, 285 receiving yards. He broke the previous school record by about 100 yards there. So it seems like a kid that's worked hard. He came into the West program as a quarterback. They had plenty of quarterbacks, was willing to make that transition to wide receiver, and that's kind of flourished in that role.
Mm-hmm. And Nellie alluded to it, West and Cedar Falls this weekend, renewal of an old Metro rivalry. How big a game is this?
A huge game. I think not only a Metro rivalry, but I believe are they in the same district as well. And so you look at Cedar Falls. They're coming off a hard-fought triple overtime loss at Urbandale. They want to get back on track with a win. West, you have to look at Cedar Falls as kind of the measuring stick in the Metro area still, with what they've done over the tradition of their program in recent history. And any chance they have to show that they're on that same level has to be exciting for those kids.
Mm-hmm. One other thing too, with high school football, we have an intriguing matchup coming up this week. That will be our game of the week. Lake New Hartford hosting Hudson, 2 top 10 teams, 2 unbeatens, 2 communities that are pretty close to each other. Your Thursday preview deals with this. Can you give us a preview of the preview?
I guess, yeah, it's kind of a unique thing for Hudson. It's a program that's been on the upswing, I think, here these past couple years. Coach Justin Brecky's done a nice job with them, but you look at the last 2 weeks, they're down 12 points at halftime in back-to-back games against Sumner Fredericksburg and Jessup, and win each game by a single point. Against Sumner Fredericksburg, they won it on a gutsy 2-point conversion there at the end, and then against Jessup, they put together a drive late to win. So it's a Hudson team that's shown if you let them stick around in the fourth quarter, they're going to be able to make some plays and find a way. The question is, will Dike New Hartford let it become a 4-quarter game? Dike New Hartford's a team that's really dominated them in recent years. It's a team that's shown they have a really stellar defense. I saw them opening week against Appleton and Parkersburg, and they gave them nothing. And Appleton and Parkersburg the past couple weeks has scored around 50 points. So you have to wonder if Hudson's going to be able to move the ball and be able to hang around with them. You can't imagine if they get down early in this game that they're going to have as good of an opportunity to come back. But it should be a very intriguing matchup, just in the sense that Dike New Hartford will have a homecoming crowd there. They always turn out well, and Hudson travels well, and there's a lot of reasons in that community to be energized about that football team right now.
And quickly shifting to high school volleyball, I think last weekend was a big tournament weekend. We had a couple, I believe you were at one. Anything we learned from that, and what might be ahead for some of the Metro teams coming up?
Well, it's kind of interesting. This tournament in Dike New Hartford I covered last weekend. You had 5 ranked schools there, and 4 of them were the better teams in Northeast Iowa. When you look at Dike New Hartford, the 4-time defending state champions, Sumner Fredericksburg, Cedar Falls, and Sumner Fredericksburg and Cedar Falls each entered that tournament with a ton of success. Sumner Fredericksburg entered it undefeated. Cedar Falls had just 1 loss. And then Janesville, the top-ranked team in Class 1A, all playing in a round-robin format, different styles. And it was really a good statement for Cedar Falls to get back on track after they lost to Cedar Rapids Kennedy on Tuesday. And I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic about that Cedar Falls program, starting with those 3 sophomores they have in Taylor Lynch, Claire Gertis, and Grace Birkin. I think that's a nice piece. Those kids have developed well, and it should be exciting to see what they can do at the 5A level. And then last night, a score that kind of stood out was Wapsie Valley beating Dike New Hartford in 5 sets in another NICL match, and those matches have just been really barn burners across that conference this year. So it's been exciting, and it'll be interesting to see who wins that league.
You don't really like to get into predictions too much, especially this time of year, but I think it's fairly safe to say that Northeast Iowa will have a very strong presence at the state volleyball tournament when we get to that point in November. Shifting gears a little bit to college football, last weekend, another busy weekend. This weekend, not so much. We have 2 teams with Ys, Iowa State and UNI, with Iowa hosting Dan McCarty, North Texas. But Nellie, I want to get to you and your trip to the West Coast, burn the midnight oil and probably a little bit past that. How big a win was UNI's decisive victory over a Cal Poly team that ran the triple option?
I tell you, it was impressive the way the way they went out and did it in business-like fashion. And I think it's huge on the scale. You know, you come into the season and everybody talked about that first 5 games. You know, I think to be sitting 2-1 right now. I think Coach Farley and the team is feeling, hey, we're where we should be. You beat Iowa State. That's a huge feather in your cap. But you're stepping up. You're stepping up. But then if you come back and you have Eastern Washington and all the success they had, and then Cal Poly, who was coming off a win at Montana, and then they were tied with Arizona State with about 8 minutes to go in the fourth quarter and lose that by 2 touchdowns. So going out there, you didn't know, you're facing a tough team, and they came out and UNI took the game away from them in the first quarter, scored up and down the field 3 times. I think after that initial drive, Aaron Bailey hits Derice Fountain on a quick pass, and then boom, 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 Tyvis Smith, the offensive line just blows big holes, and they go down, it's up 7-0. Cal Poly comes right back, and then just a tremendous defensive play by Jerry Farley, dives, tips the ball. DeAndre Hall intercepts his second straight one-handed because he doesn't really have use of that right hand too much with the broken hand. And, and then they go boom right back down the field. It's 21-0. They lead 28-7 at half, and, it was a real impressive performance. 2-1 now going into the bye week, and then they go to Illinois State. It was everything. The defense played well. Defense made a lot of great plays. Cal Poly had been a +6, I think, in the plus-minus, and UNI won that easily. I think +3 They created 3 turnovers, and it was a quite impressive performance. I mean, they went out and did it in business-like fashion, and they took the crowd. I mean, that was a 7th sellout in Cal Poly history in that half. By the start of the 3rd quarter, about half that crowd was gone.
I would guess that as disappointed as you and I might have been with its performance at Iowa State, that they're in some ways they're probably giving themselves a little bit of a pass there, given it was their first game of the season, first game with Aaron Bailey quarterback, first game with a revamped staff, most notably Joe Davis as the offensive coordinator, first game without David Johnson in the backfield, and so on. That's not to suggest they were looking for excuses. I don't think they are, but still they had a lot of issues to work through, and it would appear that after 3 games that they're in a pretty good position. They've worked some things out. They still have a ways to go. Still have a tough 2 games coming up in Valley football, but I think they're about as good a shape as they could expect to be. Iowa State, well, I don't know. We're not so sure about that one. The Cyclones went out to Toledo and dropped another heartbreaking game. They seem to do that more often than not. Had a chance to win it in regulation, didn't do it. Then had to endure a sack on 4th down, trailing in double overtime, and lost. And this team is at 1-2, and you could make the argument they could easily be 3-0. You spend a lot of time around that program, Nellie. Where do you think they are emotionally now with the bye week coming up and then Kansas after that on October 3rd?
I don't think you can't, just based on what happened the last 2 years, they got to be thinking, oh no, here we go again. I think each of the last 3 years they came in, they had some expectations, they were making a step forward. 2 years ago they're coming off back-to-back bowl games, and then a couple injuries here, bang, bang, and next thing you know, it rolls and they're 3-9. And last year, same thing. And I think, Quentin Budridge goes down on the 4th play of the game, and there goes their top offensive threat, and next thing you know, it's 2-10, and it just snowballed after those first couple of games. They came out firing. I think they put a point. They'd lost FCS opponents 2 years in a row. They came out. They looked really good against Northern Iowa. Defense was pretty good. Shut down. Yes, a UNI offense trying without the David Johnson the first time, started a new quarterback, but at the same time they looked really good. And now they're 1-2, and they got questions. Sam Richardson has not looked good the last 2 weeks, or at least for maybe the last, let's say, 6 quarters. It hasn't been real. Their offense, since the second half of the Iowa game, has kind of went south a little bit. Although they did put up some points against Toledo, they found some success there. But you can't help to think that in that locker room right now, there's some thoughts of here we go again. We gotta get a win here. Mm-hmm. They got a week to think about it at least.
Yes, they do. And it strikes me that Iowa is in precisely the opposite spot, going in the opposite direction. They're 3-0 and have to be thrilled to be there, especially the way they're playing. They won a dramatic, emotional game over Pittsburgh, a solid Pittsburgh team, kicking a game-winning field goal, 57 yards no less. On the final play, there was a great deal of emotion in the crowd beforehand with bringing out Greenwood as the honorary captain. Just a big night for that program. They are heavily favored to beat Coach McCarney and his North Texas Mean Green. You look at their schedule, and again, you don't want to get too far ahead of yourself here, but they are in shape right now, I would say, for a very, very good year.
Oh yeah, I think that momentum was just huge for a win like that under the lights against Pittsburgh. 57 yards from Marshall Kane. To be able to pull out a game like that, kind of gets things rolling. You're wondering, if there's a little apathy surrounding the program. Ticket sales were down entering the year, and now they're taking advantage of that favorable schedule, finding ways to win games they should, and they're kind of doing it with traditional Iowa form, with good defense and running the football.
Mm-hmm. Going to be an interesting couple weeks coming up there. Very quickly, let's shift to baseball. And one thing that happened last night, or 2 things that happened last night, are worth interest. One is Jake Arrieta of the Cubs, who won his 20th game. They beat the Brewers. The Cubs are a virtual lock, if you can ever call the Cubs a lock, to qualify for the playoffs, and they still have a chance to pass Pittsburgh and host that first wild card game. The Cy Young part of this is going to be most intriguing as we go forward. You have Arrieta, you have Kershaw, you have Greinke. You're a Cubs fan. I probably know which way you'd vote, but how do you think it's going to go?
Well, anytime you have 2 contenders from the same team, you have to wonder if they're going to kind of cancel each other out. I think Greinke's probably had the better full season than Kershaw. You look at his ERA, 1.65 is just ridiculous. Greinke's got that 18-3 record. The difference with Arrieta, and Greinke would be the strikeout numbers. Arrieta, I think, has 225 strikeouts, 1.88 ERA, 20-6 record. So Arrieta and Greinke very similar. I think what Arrieta has meant for this year's Cubs team, you could say, has been more valuable than what Greinke's meant for the Dodgers. But it's not a most valuable player award. It's a Cy Young award. So I think it's really a toss-up between Arrieta and Greinke at this point, with Kershaw close third. And remember that season Max Scherzer had to start out this year, what he was doing in June. It seems like he's really kind of fallen back in the conversation just with what Greinke and Arrieta have done the past couple months.
Nell, you're impartial. This is a Reds fan. If you had to vote today, who'd you vote for?
I like what Arrieta's done, because since August he has been basically pretty much unhittable. What is his ERA since August or maybe late July? 1.4, something like that.
Yeah,
he hasn't been giving up runs. I mean, and in the heat of the playoff, the Cubs were making the surge. So he's basically said, "Here, come on, jump on my back, and we're going to go every 5 days." The Cubs, they know they're going out in Arrieta and they're going to win. And that's to me. I mean, Greinke's had a great year too. It's been that way. I mean, he's 18-3. What Arrieta's
26. Yep.
20-6. But Arrieta's been so dominant in the playoff run, in the stretch. That's where my vote would go, I think, right now. It'd be him and then Greinke, yeah.
One more parting note about baseball. Last night or early this morning, I guess, Yogi Berra passed away at the age of 90. And baseball, the country, and I guess you could say the world, lost an icon, a guy who was unique in many, many ways from his background as a poor Italian kid growing up in St. Louis, who achieved great fame and great fortune, to a guy who's known for maybe as much how he said things as was what they meant with the Yogiisms. Someone who became an author, someone who became a businessman, a figure in commercials, an old form, a short little guy that would never be mistaken for a matinee idol. But I think one thing that we will forget, and one thing I write about in my column on Thursday is that it's very important to remember that this man was a great ball player. He was one of the preeminent catchers of this era or any other era. He was a part of 10 World Series championships and 14 overall with the Yankees. And he was in many ways an amazing story. And I think we'll see that throughout the day as the reaction comes in, we'll get some idea of just how much Yogi Berra will be missed. And that's about it for the September 23rd edition of the Paperboyz. Next week, we'll have another fresh set of things to talk about. I would imagine the Waterloo Blackhawks, the Hawkeyes will be part of that. And again, we'll have some thoughts on the local high school scene. But until then, this is Jim Sullivan. So long.